Section number 5 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The story of little Tsar Novinsky, the false sister, and the faithful beasts. Once upon a time, in a certain kingdom, in a certain empire, there dwelt a certain Tsar who had never had a child. One day this Tsar went to the bazaar, such a bazaar as we have at Kristin, to buy food for his needs. For though he was a Tsar, he had a mean and churlish soul, and used always to do his own marketing. And so now, too, he bought a little salt fish and went home with it. On his way homeward, a great thirst suddenly fell upon him, so he turned aside into a lonely mountain, where he knew, as his father had known before him, there was a spring of crystal clear water. He was so very thirsty that he flung himself down headlong by this spring without first crossing himself, wherefore the accursed one, Satan, immediately had power over him, and caught him by the beard. The Tsar sprang back in terror, and cried, "Let me go!" But the accursed one held him all the tighter. "Nay, I will not let thee go," cried he. Then the Tsar began to entreat him piteously. "Ask what thou wilt of me," he said, "only let me go." "Give me then," said the accursed one, "something that thou hast in the house, and then I'll let thee go." "Let me see what I have got," said the Tsar. "Oh, I know, I've got 8 horses at home, the like of which I have seen nowhere else, and I'll immediately bid my equerry bring them to thee to this spring. Take them." "I won't have them," cried the accursed one, and he held him still more tightly by the beard. "Well, then, hearken now," cried the Tsar. "I have 8 oxen. They have never yet gone a ploughing for me, or done a day's work. I'll have them brought hither. I'll feast my eyes on them once more, and then I'll have them driven into thy steppes. Take them." "No, that won't do either," said the accursed one. The Tsar went over, one by one, all the most precious things he had at home, but the accursed one said, "No," all along, and pulled him more and more tightly by the beard. When the Tsar saw that the accursed one would take none of these things, he said to him at last, "Look now, I have a wife, so lovely that the like of her is not to be found in the whole world. Take her and let me go." "No," replied the accursed one, "I will not have her." The Tsar was in great straits. "What am I to do now?" thought he. "I have offered him my lovely wife, who is the very choicest of my chattels, and he won't have her." "Then," said the accursed one, "promise me what thou shalt find awaiting thee at home, and I'll let thee go." The Tsar gladly promised this, for he could think of naught else that he had, and then the accursed one let him go. But while he had been away from home, there had been born to him a Tsarevko and Tsarivna, and they grew up not by the day, or even by the hour, but by the minute. Never were known such fine children. [Footnote: A little Tsar.] And his wife saw him coming from afar, and went out to meet him, with her 2 children, with great joy. But he, the moment he saw them, burst into tears. "Nay, my dear love," cried she, "wherefore dost thou burst into tears?" Or art thou so delighted that such children have been born unto thee that thou canst not find thy voice for tears of joy?" And he answered her, "My darling wife, on my way back from the bazaar I was athirst, and turned toward a mountain known of old to my father and me, and it seemed to me as though there were a spring of water there, though the water was very near dried up. But looking closer, I saw that it was quite full, so I bethought me that I would drink thereof. And I leaned over, when lo! the evil wanton, I mean the devil, caught me by the beard and would not let me go. I begged and prayed, but he still held me tight. 'Give me,' he said, 'what thou hast at home, or I'll never let thee go.' And I said to him, 'Lo, now I have horses.' 'I don't want thy horses,' said he. 'I have oxen,' I said. 'I don't want thine oxen,' said he. 'I have,' I said, 'a wife so fair that the like of her is not to be found in God's fair world. Take her, but let me go.' 'I don't want thy fair wife,' said he. Then I promised him what I should find at home when I get there, for I never thought that God had blessed me so. 'Come now, my darling wife, and let us bury them both, lest he take them.' 'Nay, nay, my dear husband, we had better hide them somewhere. Let us dig a ditch by our hut, just under the gables.' For there was no lordly mansions in those days, and the Tsars dwelt in peasants' huts. So they dug a ditch right under the gables, and put their children inside it, and gave them provision of bread and water. Then they covered it up, and smoothed it down, and turned into their own little hut. Presently the serpent, for the accursed one had changed himself into a serpent, came flying up in search of the children. He raged up and down outside the hut, but there was nothing to be seen. At last he cried out to the stove, "Stove, stove, where has the Tsar hidden his children?" The stove replied, "The Tsar has been a good master to me. He has put lots of warm fuel inside me. I hold to him." So fighting he could get nothing out of the stove. He cried to the hearth broom, "Hearth broom, hearth broom, where has the Tsar hidden his children?" But the hearth broom answered, "The Tsar has always been a good master to me, for he always cleans the warm grate with me. I hold to him." So the accursed one could get nothing out of the hearth broom. Then he cried to the hatchet, "Hatchet, hatchet, where has the Tsar hidden his children?" The hatchet replied, "The Tsar has always been a good master to me. He chops his wood with me, and gives me a place to lie down in, so I'll not have him disturbed." Then the devil cried to the gimlet, "Gimlet, gimlet, where has the Tsar hidden his children?" But the gimlet replied, "The Tsar has always been a good master to me. He drills little holes with me, and then lets me rest, so I'll let him rest too." Then the serpent said to the gimlet, "So the Tsar's a good master to thee, eh? Well, I can only say that if he's a good master thou sayest he is, I am rather surprised that he knocks thee on the head so much with a hammer." "Well, that's true," said the gimlet. "I never thought of that. Thou mayst take hold of me if thou wilt, and draw me out of the top of the hut, near the front gable, and wherever I fall into the marshy ground, there set to work and dig with me." The devil did so, and began digging at the spot where the gimlet fell out on the marshy ground till he had dug out the children. Now, as they had been growing all along, they were children no more, but a stately youth and a fair damsel, and the serpent took them up and carried them off. but they were big and heavy, so he soon got tired and lay down to rest, and presently fell asleep. Then the Tsarivna sat down on his head, and Tsarevko sat down beside her, till a horse came running up. The horse ran right up to them and said, "Hail, little Tsar Novishny! Art thou here by thy leave, or against thy leave?" And the little Tsar Novishny replied, "Nay, little nag, we are here against our leave, not by our leave." "So sit on my back," said the horse, "and I'll carry you off." So they got on his back, for the serpent was asleep all the time. Then the horse galloped off with them, and he galloped far, far away. Presently the serpent awoke, looked all around him, and could see nothing, till he had got up out of the reeds in which he lay, when he saw them in the far distance and gave chase. He soon caught them up, and little Tsar Novishny said to the horse, "Oh, little nag, how hot it is! It is all up with thee and us." And in truth the horse's tail was already singed to a coal, for the serpent was hard behind them, blazing like fire. The horse perceived that he could do no more, so he gave one last wriggle and died. But they, poor things, were left alive. "Whom have you been listening to?" said the serpent, as he flew up to them. "Don't you know that I am your father and Tsar, and have the right to carry you away?" "Oh, dear daddy, we'll never listen to anybody else again." "Well, I'll forgive you this time," said the serpent, "but mind you never do it again." Again the serpent took them up and carried them off. Presently he grew tired and again lay down to rest, and nodded off. Then the Tsarivna sat down with his head, and the Tsarevko sat down beside her, till a humble bee came flying up. "Hail, little Tsar Novishny!" cried the humble bee. "Hail, little humble bee!" said the little Tsar. "Say, friends, are you here by your leave, or against your leave?" "Alas, humble bee, 'tis not with my leave. I have been brought hither, but against my leave, as thou mayst see for thyself." "Then sit on my back," said the bee, "and I'll carry you away." "But, dear little humble bumblebee, if a horse couldn't save us, how will you?" "I cannot tell till I try," said the humble bee; "but if I cannot save you, I'll let you fall." "Well, then," said the little Tsar, "we'll try, for we two must perish in any case, but thou perhaps mayst get off scot-free." So they embraced each other, sat on the humble bee, and off they went. When the serpent awoke he missed them, and raising his head above the reeds and rushes, saw them flying far away, and he set off after them at full speed. "Alas, little humble bumblebee!" cried the Tsar Novishny, "how burning hot 'tis getting! We shall all three perish." Then the humble bee turned his wing and shook them off. They fell to earth, and he flew away. Then the serpent came flying up and fell upon them with open jaws. "Aha!" cried he, with a snort, "you've come to grief again, eh? Didn't I tell you to listen to nobody but me?" Then they fell to weeping and entreating. "We listen to you alone and to nobody else." And they wept and entreated so much that at last he forgave them. So he took them up and carried them off once more. Again he sat down to rest and fell asleep. And again the Tsarivna sat upon his head, and the Tsarevko sat down by her side, till a bullock came up, full tilt, and said to them, "Hail, Tsar Novishny! Art thou here with thy leave, or art thou here against thy leave?" "Alas, dear little bullock, I came not hither by my leave, but maybe I was brought here against my leave." "Sit on my back, then," said the bullock, "and I'll carry you away." But they said, "Nay, if a horse and a bee could not manage it, how wilt thou?" "Nonsense," said the bullock, "sit down, and I'll carry you off." So he persuaded them. "Well, we can only perish once," they cried, and the bullock carried them off, and every little while they went a little mile, and jolted so that they very nearly tumbled off. Presently the serpent awoke and was very, very wrath. He rose high above the woods and flew after them. Oh, how fast he did fly! Then cried the little Tsar, "Alas, bullock, how hot it turns! Thou wilt perish, and we shall perish also." Then said the bullock, "Little Tsar, look into my left ear, and thou wilt see a horse comb. Pull it out and throw it behind thee." The little Tsar took out the comb and threw it behind him, and it became a huge wood, as thick and jagged as the teeth of a horse comb. But the bullock went on at his old pace. Every little while they went a little mile, and jolted so that they nearly tumbled off. The serpent, however, managed to gnaw his way through the wood, and then flew after them again. Then cried the little Tsar, "Alas, bullock, it begins to burn again. Thou wilt perish, and we shall perish also." Then said the bullock, "Look into my right ear, and pull out the brush thou dost find there, and fling it behind thee." So he threw it behind him, and it became a forest as thick as a brush. Then the serpent came up to the forest and began to gnaw at it, and at last he gnawed his way through it, but the bullock went on at his old pace. Every little while they went a little mile, and they jolted so that they nearly tumbled off. But when the serpent had gnawed his way through the forest, he again pursued them, and again they felt a burning. And the little Tsar said, "Alas, bullock, look, look, how it burns! Look, look, how we perish!" Now the bullock was already nearing the sea. "Look into my right ear," said the bullock. "Draw out the little handkerchief thou findest there, and throw it in front of me." He drew it out and flung it, and before them stood a bridge. Over this bridge they galloped, and by the time they had done so the serpent reached the sea. Then said the bullock to the little Tsar, "Take up the handkerchief again and wave it behind me." Then he took and waved it till the bridge doubled up behind them, and went and spread it out again in front of them. The serpent came up to the edge of the sea, but there he had to stop, for he had nothing to run upon. So they crossed over the sea right to the other side, and the serpent remained on his own side. Then the bullock said to them, "I'll lead you to a hut close to the sea, and in that hut you must live, and you must take and slay me." But they fell a weeping sore. "How shall we slay thee?" they cried. "Thou art our own little dad, and hast saved us from death." "Nay," said the bullock, "but you must slay me, and 1/4 of me you must hang up on the stove, and the 2/4 you must place on the ground in a corner, and the 3/4 you must put in the corner at the entrance of the hut, and the 4/4 you must put round the threshold, so that there will be a quarter in all 4 corners." So they took and slew him in front of the threshold, and they hung his 4 quarters in the 4 corners as he had bidden them, and then they lay down to sleep. Now the Tsarevko awoke at midnight, and saw in the right-hand corner a horse so gorgeously caparisoned that he could not resist rising at once and mounting it. and in the threshold corner there was a self-slicing sword, and in the third corner stood the dog Proteus, and in the stove corner stood the dog Negvita. [Footnote: The two fabulous hounds of Ruthenian legend.] The little Tsar longed to be off. "Rise, little sister," cried he, "God has been good to us. Rise, dear little sister, and let us pray to God." So they arose and praised to God, and while they prayed the day dawned. Then he mounted his horse and took the dogs with him, that he might live by what they caught. So they lived in their hut by the sea, and one day the sister went down to the sea to wash her bed linen and her body linen in the blue waters. And the serpent came and said to her, "How didst thou manage to jump over the sea?" "Look now," said she, "we crossed over in this way. My brother has a handkerchief which becomes a bridge when he waves it behind him." And then the serpent said to her, "I'll tell thee what, ask him for this handkerchief. Say thou dost want to wash it, and take and wave it, and I'll then be able to cross over to thee and live with thee, and will poison thy brother." Then she went home and said to her brother, "Give me that handkerchief, dear little brother, it is dirty, so I'll wash it and give it back to thee." And he believed her and gave it to her, for she was dear to him, and he thought her good and true. Then she took the handkerchief, went down to the sea and waved it, and behold there was a bridge. Then the serpent crossed over to her side, and they walked to the hut together and consulted as to the best way of destroying her brother and removing him from God's fair world. Now it was his custom to rise at dawn, mount his horse, and go a-hunting, for hunting he dearly loved. So the serpent said to her, "Take to thy bed and pretend to be ill, and say to him, 'I dreamed a dream, dear brother, and lo, I saw thee go and fetch me wolf's milk to make me well.' Then he'll go and fetch it, and the wolves will tear his dogs to pieces, and then we can take and do to him as we list, for his strength is in his dogs." So when the brother came home from hunting, the serpent hid himself, but the sister said, "I have dreamed a dream, dear brother. Methought thou didst go and fetch me wolf's milk, and I drank of it, and my health came back to me, for I am so weak that God grant I die not." "I'll fetch it," said her brother. So he mounted his horse and set off. Presently he came to a little thicket, and immediately a she-wolf came out. Then Proteus ran her down, and Nedviga held her fast, and the little Tsar milked her and let her go. And the she-wolf looked round and said, "Well for thee, little Tsar Novishny, that thou hast let me go. Methought thou wouldst not let me go alive. For that thou hast let me go, I'll give thee, little Tsar Novishny, a wolf whelp." Then she said to the little wolf, "Thou shalt serve this dear little Tsar as though he were thine own dear father." Then the little Tsar went back, and now there were with him 2 dogs and a little wolf whelp that trotted behind them. Now the serpent and the false sister saw him coming from afar, and 3 dogs trotting behind him. And the serpent said to her, "What a sly wily one it is! He has added another watchdog to his train. Lie down and make thyself out worse than ever, and ask bear's milk of him, for the bears will tear him to pieces without doubt." Then the serpent turned himself into a needle, and she took him up and stuck him in the wall. Meanwhile the brother dismounted from his horse, and came with his dogs and the wolf to the hut, and the dogs began snuffing at the needle in the wall. And the sister said to him, tell me, why dost thou keep these big dogs? They let me have no rest." Then he called to the dogs, and they sat down. And his sister said to him, "I dreamed a dream, my brother. I saw thee go and search and fetch me from somewhere bear's milk, and I drank of it, and my health came back to me." "I will fetch it," said her brother. But first of all he laid him down to sleep. Nedviga lay at his head, and Proteus at his feet, and Vovchok by his side. Little wolf. So he slept through the night, and at dawn he arose and mounted his good steed, and hied him thence. Again they came to a little thicket, and this time a she-bear came out. Proteus ran her down, Nedviga held her fast, and the little Tsar milked her and let her go. Then the she-bear said, "Hail to thee, little Tsarnovsky! Because thou hast let me go, I'll give thee a bear cub." But to the little bear she said, "Obey him as though he were thine own father." So he set off home, and the serpent and his sister saw that four were now trotting behind him. "Look," said the serpent, "if there are not four running behind him, shall we never be able to destroy him? I tell thee what, ask him to get the hare's milk, perhaps his beasts will gobble up the hare before he can milk it." So he turned himself into a needle again, and she fastened him into the wall, only a little higher up, so that the dogs should not get at him. Then, when the little Tsar dismounted from his horse, he and his dogs came into the hut, and the dogs began snuffing at the needle in the wall, and barked at it. But the brother knew not the cause thereof. But his sister burst into tears, and said, "Why dost thou keep such monstrous dogs? Such a kennel of them makes me ill with anguish." Then he shouted to the dogs, and they sat down quite still. Then she said to him, "I am so ill, brother, that nothing will make me well but hare's milk. Go and get it for me." "I'll get it," said he. But first he laid him down to sleep. Nedviga lay at his head, Proteus at his feet, and Vovchok and Medvedik each at one side. Little bear. He slept through the night, but at dawn he mounted his steed, took his pack with him, and departed. Again he came to a little thicket, and a she-hare popped out. Proteus ran her down. Nedviga held her fast. Then he milked her and let her go. Then the hare said, "Hail to thee, little Tsarnovsky! Because thou hast let me go, I thought you wouldst have torn me to pieces with thy dogs. I'll give thee a leveret." But to the leveret she said, "Obey him, as though he were thine own father." Then he went home, and again they saw him from afar. "What a wily rogue it is!" said they. "All five are following him, and he is as well as ever." "Ask him to get the fox's milk," said the serpent. "Perhaps when he goes for it, his beasts will leave him in the lurch." Then he changed himself into a needle, and she stuck him still higher in the wall, so that the dogs could not get at him. The Tsar again dismounted from his horse, and his dogs rushed up to the hut and began sniffing at the needle. But his sister fell a-weeping, and said, "Why dost thou keep such monstrous dogs?" He shouted to them, and they sat down quietly on their haunches. Then his sister said again, "I am ailing, my brother. Go and get me fox's milk, and I shall be well." "I'll fetch it for thee," said her brother. But first he lay down to sleep. Nedviga lay at his head, Proteus at his feet, and Vovchok, Medvedik, and the leveret by his side. The little Tsar slept through the night, and at dawn he arose, mounted his horse, took his pack with him, and went off. They came to the little thicket, and a vixen popped out. Proteus ran her down, Nedviga held her fast, and the little Tsar milked her and let her go. Then said the vixen to him, "Thanks to thee, little Tsar Novishny, that thou hast let me go. Methought thou wouldst tear me into pieces with thy dogs. For thy kindness I give thee a little fox." But to the little fox she said, "Obey him as though he were thine own father." So he went home, and they saw him coming from afar, and lo! now he had 6 guardians, and yet had come by no harm. "'Tis no good, we shall never do for him," said the serpent. "Look now, make thyself worse than ever, and say to him, I am very ill, my brother, because in another realm, far, far away, there is a wild boar who plows with his nose, and sows with his ears, and harrows with his tail, and in that same empire there is a mill with 12 furnaces that grinds its own grain and casts forth its own meal, and if thou wilt bring me of the meal that is beneath these 12 furnaces, so that I may make me a cake of it and eat, my soul shall live." Then her brother said to her, "Methinks thou art not my sister, but my foe." But she replied, "How can I be thy foe when we two live all alone together in a strange land?" "Well, I will get it for thee," he said, for again he believed in his sister. So he mounted his steed, took his pack with him, and departed, and he came to the land where were that boar and that mill she told him of. He came up to the mill, tied his horse to it, and entered into it. And there were 12 furnaces there, and 12 doors, and these 12 doors needed no man to open or shut them, for they opened and shut themselves. He took a meal from beneath the first furnace, and went through the second door, but the dogs were shut in by the doors. Through all 12 doors he went, and came out again at the first door, and looked about him, and there were no dogs to be seen. He whistled, and he heard his dogs whining where they could not get out. Then he wept sore, mounted his horse, and went home. He got home, and there was his sister making merry with the serpent. And no sooner did the brother enter the hut than the serpent said, "Well, we wanted flesh, and now flesh has come to us." For they had just slain a bullock, and on the ground where they had slain it there sprang up a whitethorn tree, so lovely that it may be told of in tales, but neither imagined nor divined. When the little Tsar saw it, he said, "Oh, my dear brother-in-law," for without his dogs he must needs to be courteous to the serpent, "pray let me climb up that whitethorn tree and have a good look about me." But the sister said to the serpent, "Dear friend, make him get ready boiling water for himself, and we will boil him, for it does not become thee to dirty thy hands." "Very well," said the serpent, "he shall make the boiling water ready." So they ordered the little Tsar to go and chop wood and get the hot water ready. Then he went and chopped wood, but as he was doing so a starling flew out and said to him, "Not so fast, not so fast, little Tsar Novishny, be as slow as thou canst, for thy dogs have gnawed their way through 2 doors." Then the little Tsar poured water into the cauldron and put fire under it, but the wood that he had cut was rotten and very, very dry, so that it burned most fiercely, and he took and sprinkled it with water, and sprinkled it again and again, so that it might not burn too much. And when he went out into the courtyard for more water, the starling said to him, "Not so fast, not so fast, little Tsar Novsky, for thy dogs have gnawed their way through 4 doors." As he was returning to the hut his sister said to him, "That water does not boil up quickly enough. Take the fire shovel and poke the fire." So he did so, and the faggots blazed up, but when she had gone away he sprinkled them with water again, so that they might burn more slowly. Then he went into the courtyard again, and the starling met him and said, "Not so fast, not so fast, little Tsar. Be as slow as thou canst, for thy dogs have gnawed their way through 6 doors." Then he returned to the hut, and his sister again took up the shovel and made him poke the fire. And when she went away again he flung water on the burning coals. So he kept going in and out of the courtyard. "'Tis weary work," cried he, but the starling said to him, "Not so fast, not so fast, little Tsar Novsky, for thy dogs have already gnawed their way through 10 doors." The little Tsar picked up the rottenest wood he could find and flung it on the fire, to make believe he was making haste, but sprinkled it at the same time with water, so that it might not burn up too quickly. And yet the kettle soon began to boil. Again he went to the forest for more wood, and the starling said to him, "Not so fast, not so fast, little Tsar, for thy dogs have already gnawed their way through all the doors, and are now resting." But now the water was boiling, and his sister ran up and said to him, "Come, boil thyself, be quick. How much longer art thou going to keep us waiting?" Then he, poor thing, began ladling the boiling water over himself, while she got the table ready and spread the cloth, that the serpent might eat her brother on that very table. But he, poor thing, kept ladling himself, and cried, "Oh, my dear brother-in-law, pray let me climb up to the top of that white thorn tree. Let me have a look out from the top of it, for thence one can see afar." "Don't let him, dear," said the sister to the serpent. "He will stay there too long and lose our precious time." But the serpent replied, "It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, let him climb up if he likes." So the little Tsar went up to the tree and began to climb it. He did not miss a single branch, and stopped a little at each one, to gain time, and so he climbed up to the very top, and then he took out his flute and began to play upon it. But the starling flew up to him and said, "Not so fast, little Tsar Novsky, for lo! thy dogs are running to thee with all their might." But his sister ran out and said, "What art thou playing up there for? Thou dost forget perhaps that we are waiting for thee down here." Then he began to descend the tree, but he stopped at every branch on his way down, while his sister kept on calling to him to come down quicker. At last he came to the last branch, and as he stood upon it and leaped down to the ground, he thought to himself, "Now I perish." At that same instant his dogs and his beasts, growling loudly, came running up and stood in a circle around him. Then he crossed himself and said, "Glory to thee, O Lord! I have still, perchance, a little time to live in thy fair world." Then he called aloud to the serpent, and said, "And now, dear brother-in-law, come out, for I am ready for thee." Out came the serpent to eat him, but he said to his dogs and his beasts, "Vovchok, Medvedik, Proteus, Negva, seize him!" Then the dogs and beasts rushed upon him and tore him to bits. Then the little Tsar collected the pieces and burnt them to ashes, and the little fox rolled his brush in the ashes till it was covered with them, and then went out into the open field and scattered them to the 4 winds. But while they are tearing the serpent to pieces, the wicked sister knocked out his tooth and hid it. After it was all over the little Tsar said to her, "As thou hast been such a false friend to me, sister, thou must remain here while I go into another kingdom." Then he made 2 buckets and hung them up on the whitethorn tree, and said to his sister, "Look now, sister, if thou weepest for me, this bucket will fill with tears, but if thou weepest for the serpent, that bucket will fill with blood." Then she fell a weeping and praying, and said to him, "Don't leave me, brother, but take me with thee." "I won't," said he; "such a false friend as thou art I'll not have with me. Stay where thou art." So he mounted his horse, called to him his dogs and his beasts, and went his way into another kingdom and into another empire. He went on and on till he came to a certain city, and in this city there was only one spring, and in this spring sat a dragon with 12 heads. And it was so that when any went to draw water from this well the dragon rose up and ate them, and there was no other place whence that city could draw its water. So the little Tsar came to that town and put up at the stranger's inn, and he asked his host, "What is the meaning of all this running and crying of the people in the streets?" "Why, dost thou not know?" said he. "It is the turn of the Tsar to send his daughter to the dragon." Then he went out and listened, and heard the people say, "The Tsar proclaims that whoever is able to slay the dragon, to him will he give his daughter and 1/2 of his tsardom." Then the little Tsar Novishny stepped forth and said, "I am able to slay this evil dragon." So all the people immediately sent and told the Tsar, "A stranger has come hither who says he is ready to meet and slay the dragon." Then the Tsar bade them to take him to the watch house and put him among the guards. Then they led out the Tsarivna, and behind her they led him, and behind him came his beasts and his horse. And the Tsarivna was so lovely and so richly attired that all who beheld her burst into tears. But the moment the dragon appeared and opened his mouth to devour the Tsarivna, the little Tsar cried to his self-slicing sword, "Fall upon him!" and to his beasts he cried, "Protis, Medvik, Vovchok, Nedva, seize him!" Then the self-slicing sword and the beasts fell upon him and tore him into little bits. When they had finished tearing him, the little Tsar took the remains of the body and burnt them to ashes, and the little fox took up all the ashes on her tail and scattered them to the 4 winds. Then he took the Tsarivna by the hand and led her to the Tsar, and the people rejoiced because their water was free again, and the Tsarivna gave him the nuptial ring. Then they set off home again. They went on and on, for it was a long way from the tsardom of that Tsar, and at last he grew weary and lay down in the grass, and she sat at his head. Then his lackey crept up to him, unfastened the self-slicing sword from his side, went up to the little Tsar, and said, "Self-slicing sword, slay him!" Then the self-slicing sword cut him into little bits, and his beasts knew nothing about it, for they were sleeping after their labours. After that the lackey said to the Tsarivna, "Thou must say now to all men that I have saved thee from death, or if not, I will do to thee what I have done to him. Swear that thou wilt say this thing." Then she said, "I will swear that thou didst save me from death," for she was sore afraid of the lackey. Then they returned to the city, and the Tsar was very glad to see them, and clothed the lackey in good apparel, and they all made merry together. Now when Nedviga awoke, he perceived that his master was no longer there, and immediately awoke all the rest, and they all began to think and consider which of them was the swiftest. And when they had thought it well over, they judged that the hare was the swiftest, and they resolved that the hare should run and get living and healing water, and the apple of youth also. So the hare ran to fetch this water and this apple, and he ran and ran till he came to a certain land, and in this land the hare saw a spring, and close to the spring grew an apple tree with the apples of youth, and this spring and this apple tree were guarded by a Muscovite. Oh, so strong, so strong! And he waved his sabre again and again, so that not even a mouse could make its way up to that well. What was to be done? Then the little hare had resort to subtlety, and made herself crooked, and limped toward the spring as if she were lame. When the Muscovite saw her, he said, "What sort of little beast is this? I never saw the like of it before." So the hare passed him by, and went farther and farther on till she came right up to the well. The Muscovite stood there and opened his eyes wide, but the hare had now got up to the spring, and took a little flask of the water and nipped off a little apple, and was off in a trice. She ran back to the little Tsar Novishny, and Nedviga immediately took the water, and sprinkled therewith the fragments of the little Tsar, and the fragments came together again. Then he poured some of the living water into his mouth, and he became alive, and gave him a bite of the apple of youth, and he instantly grew young again and stronger than ever. Then the little Tsar rose upon his feet, stretched himself, and yawned. "What a long time I've been asleep!" cried he. "'Tis a good thing for thee that we got the living and healing water," said Proteus. "But what shall we do next?" said they all. Then they all took counsel together, and agreed that the little Tsar should disguise himself as an old man, so go to the Tsar's palace. So the little Tsar Novishny disguised himself as an old man, and went to the palace of the Tsar. And when he got there he begged them to let him in, that he might see the young married people. But the lackeys would not let him in. Then the Tsarivna herself heard the sound of his begging and praying, and commanded them to admit him. Now when he entered the room, and took off his cap and cloak, the ring which the Tsarivna had given him when he slew the serpent sparkled, so that she knew him, but not believing her own eyes, she said to him, "Come hither, thou godly old pilgrim, that I may show thee hospitality." Then the little Tsar drew near to the table, and the Tsarivna poured him out a glass of wine and gave it to him, and he took it with his left hand. She marked that he did not take it with the hand on which was the ring, so she drank off that glass herself. Then she filled another glass and gave it him, and he took it with his right hand. Then she immediately recognized her ring, and said to her father, "This man is my husband, who delivered me from death; but that fellow," pointing to the lackey, "that rascally Slavish soul killed my husband, and made me say that he was my husband." When the Tsar heard this, he boiled over with rage. "So that is what thou art," said he to the lackey, and immediately he bade them bind him and tie him to the tail of a horse so savage that no man could ride it, and then turn it loose into the endless steppe. But the little Tsar Novishny sat down behind the table and made merry. So the Tsarevko and the Tsarivna lived a long time together in happiness. But one day she asked him, "What of thy kindred and thy father's house?" Then he told her all about his sister. She immediately bade him saddle his horse, and take his beasts with him, go in search of her. They came to the place where he had left her, and saw that the bucket which was put up for the serpent was full of blood, but that the little Tsar's bucket was all dry and falling to pieces. Then he perceived that she was still lamenting for the serpent, and said to her, "God be with thee, but I will know thee no more. Stay here, and never will I look upon the face again." But she began to entreat and caress and implore him that he would take her with him. Then the brother had compassion on his sister, and took her away with him. Now when they got home she took out the serpent's tooth which she had hidden about her, and put it beneath his pillow on the bed whereon he slept. And at night time the little Tsar went to lie down, and the tooth killed him. His wife thought that he was sulky, and therefore did not speak to her, so she begged him to not be angry, and getting no answer, took him by the hand, and lo! his hand was cold, cold as lead, and she screamed out. But Proteus came bounding through the door and kissed his master. Then the little Tsar became alive again, but Proteus died. Then Nedviga kissed Proteus, and Proteus became alive, but Nedviga died. Then Zarvo said to Medvedik, "Kiss Nedviga." He did so, and Nedviga became alive again, but Medvedik died. And so they went on kissing each other from the greatest to the smallest, till the turn came to the hare. She kissed Vovchok and died, but Vovchok remained alive. What was to be done? Now that the little hare had died, there was none to kiss her back into life again. "Kiss her," said the little Tsar to the little fox. But the little fox was artful, and taking the little hare on his shoulder, he trotted off to the forest. He carried her to a place where lay a felled oak, with two branches, one on the top of the other, and put the hare on the lower branch. Then he ran under the branch and kissed the hare, but took good care that the branch should be between them. Thereupon the serpent's tooth flew out of the hare, and fastened itself in the upper branch, and both fox and hare scampered back out of the forest alive and well. When the others saw them both alive, they rejoiced greatly that no harm had come to any of them from the tooth. But they seized the sister and tied her to the tail of the savage horse, and let her loose upon the endless steppe. So they all lived the merry lives of Tsars who feast continually. And I was there too, and drank wine and mead till my mouth ran over, and it trickled all down my beard. So there's the whole Kaza for you. End of section 5. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC.
Section 6 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anthony Castellani. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Vampire and St. Michael. Once upon a time, in a certain village, there lived two neighbors. One was rich, very rich, and the other so poor that he had nothing in the world but a little hut, and that was tumbling about his ears. At length things came to such a pass with the poor man that he had nothing to eat, and could get work nowhere. Full of grief, he bethought him what he should do. He thought, and at last he said, "Look ye, wife, I'll go to my rich neighbor. Perchance he will lend me a silver rouble. That, at any rate, will be enough to buy bread with." So he went. He came to the rich man. "Good health to my lord," cried he. "Good health. I have come on an errand to thee, dear little master." "What may thine errand be?" inquired the rich man. Alas! I would to God that I had no need to say it. It has come to such a pass with us, that there's not a crust of bread nor a farthing of money in the house. So I have come to thee, dear little master. Lend us but a silver rouble, and we will be ever thankful to thee, and I'll work myself old to pay it back. But who will stand surety for thee? Asked the rich man. I know not if any man will, I am so poor. Yet, perchance, God and St. Michael will be my sureties. And he pointed at the icon in the corner. Then the icon of St. Michael spoke to the rich man from the niche, and said, Come now, lend it him, and put it down to my account. God will repay thee. Well, said the rich man, I'll lend it to thee. So he lent it, and the poor man thanked him and returned to his home full of joy. But the rich man was not content that God should give him back his loan by blessing him in his flocks and herds, and in his children, and in his health, and in the blessed fruits of the earth. He waited and waited for the poor man to come and pay him back his rouble, and at last he went to seek him. Thou son of a dog, he shouted before the house, why hast thou not brought me back my money? Thou knowest how to borrow, but thou forgettest to repay. Then the wife of the poor man burst into tears. He would repay thee indeed if he were in this world, said she, but lo, he died but a little while ago. The rich man snarled at her and departed, but when he got home he said to the icon, A pretty surety thou art. Then he took St. Michael down from the niche, dug out his eyes, and began beating him. He beat St. Michael again and again, and at last he flung him into a puddle and trampled on him. I'll give it thee for standing me surety so scurvily, said he. While he was thus abusing St. Michael, a young fellow about 20 years old came along that way and said to him, What art thou doing, my father? I am beating him, because he stood surety and has played me false. He took upon himself the repayment of a silver rouble, which I lent to the son of a pig, who has since gone away and died. That is why I am beating him now. Beat him not, my father. I'll give thee a silver rouble, but do thou give me this holy image. Take him if thou wilt, but see that thou bring me the silver rouble first. Then the young man ran home and said to his father, Dad, give me a silver rouble. Wherefore, my son? I would buy a holy image, said he, and he told his father how he had seen that heathen beating St. Michael. Nay, my son, whence shall we, who are so poor, find a silver rouble to give to him who is so rich? Nay, but give it me, Dad. And he begged and prayed till he got it. Then he ran back as quickly as he could, paid the silver rouble to the rich man, and got the holy image. He washed it clean, and placed it in the midst of sweet-smelling flowers, and so they lived on as before. Now this youth had 3 uncles, rich merchants, who sold all manner of merchandise, and went in ships to foreign lands, where they sold their goods and made their gains. One day, when his uncles were again making ready to depart into foreign lands, he said to them, Take me with you. Why wouldst thou go? Said they. We have wares to sell, but what hast thou? Yet take me, said he, but thou hast nothing. I will make me lathes and boards, and take them with me, said he. His uncles laughed at him for imagining such wares as these, but he begged and prayed them till they were wearied. Well, come, they said, though there is naught for thee to do, only take not much of these wares of thine with thee, for our ships are already full. Then he made him lathes and boards, and put them on board the ship, took St. Michael with him, and they departed. They went on and on. They sailed a short distance, and they sailed a long distance, till at last they came to another tsardom and another empire. And the Tsar of this tsardom had an only daughter, so lovely that the like of her is neither to be imagined nor divined in God's fair world, neither may it be told in tales. Now this Tsarina one day went down to the river to bathe, and plunged into the water without first crossing herself, whereupon the evil spirit took possession of her. The Tsarina got out of the water, and straightway fell ill of so terrible a disease that it may not be told of. Do what they would, and the wise men and the wise women did their utmost, it was of no avail. In the few days she grew worse, and died. Then the Tsar, her father, made a proclamation that people should come and read the prayers for the dead over her dead body, and so exorcise the evil spirit, and whosoever delivered her was to have half his power, and half his tsardom. And the people came in crowds, but none of them could read the prayers for the dead over her. It was impossible. Every evening a man went into the church, and every morning they swept out his bones, for there was naught else of him remaining. And the Tsar was very wrath. "All my people will be devoured," cried he, and he commanded that all the foreign merchants passing through his realm should be made to read prayers for the dead over his daughter's body. "And if they will not read," said he, "they shall not depart from my kingdom." So the foreign merchants went one by one. In the evening a merchant was shut up in the church, and in the early morning they came and found and swept away his bones. At last it came to the turn of the young man's uncles to read the prayers for the dead in the church. They wept and lamented and cried, "We are lost! We are lost! Heaven help us!" Then the eldest uncle said to the lad, "Listen, good simpleton. It has now come to my turn to read prayers over the Tsarina. Do thou go in my stead and pass the night in the church, and I'll give thee all my ship." "Nay, but," said the simpleton, "what if she tear me to pieces too? I won't go." But then St. Michael said to him, "Go and fear not. Stand in the very middle of the church, fenced round about with thy laths and boards, and take with thee a basket full of pears. When she rushes at thee, take and scatter the pears, and it will take her till cock-crow to pick them all up. But do thou go on reading thy prayers all the time, and look not up, whatever she may do." When the night came, he took up his laths and boards and a basket of pears, and went to the church. He entrenched himself behind his boards, stood there, and began to read. At dead of night there was a rustling and a rattling. "O Lord, what was that?" There was a shaking of the bier. Bang! Bang! And the Tsarina arose from her coffin and came straight toward him. She leapt upon the boards and made a grab at him and fell back. Then she leapt at him again, and again she fell back. Then he took his basket and scattered the pears. All through the church they rolled, she after them, and she tried to pick them up till cock-crow, and at the very first cock-a-doodle-doo, she got into her bier again and lay still. When God's bright day dawned, the people came to clean out the church and sweep away his bones. But there he was, reading his prayers, and the rumor of it went through the town, and they were all filled with joy. Next night it was the turn of the second uncle, and he began to beg and pray, "Go thou, simpleton, in my stead. Look now, thou hast already passed a night there. Thou mayst very well pass another, and I'll give thee all my ship." But he said, "I won't go. I am afraid." But then St. Michael said to him again, "Fear not, but go. Fence thee all about with thy boards, and take with thee a basket of nuts. When she rushes at thee, scatter thy nuts, and the nuts will go rolling all about the church, and it will take her till cock-crow to gather them all up. But do thou go on reading thy prayers, nor look thou up, whatever may happen." And he did so. He took his boards and the basket of nuts, and went to the church at nightfall and read. A little after midnight there was a rustling and an uproar, and the whole church shook. Then came a fumbling round about the coffin. Bang! Bang! Up she started and made straight for him. She leapt and plunged. She very nearly got through the boards. She hissed like seething pitch, and her eyes glared at him like coals of fire. But it was of no use. He read on, and didn't once look at her. Besides, he scattered his nuts, and she went after them and tried to pick them all up till cock-crow. And at the first cock-a-doodle-doo, she leapt into her coffin again and pulled down the lid. In the morning the people came to sweep away his bones, and lo! They found him alive. The next night he had to go again in the third uncle's stead. Then he sat down and cried and wailed, "Alas! Alas! What shall I do? 'Twere better I had never been born." But St. Michael said to him, "Weep not, 'twill all end happily. Fence thyself about with thy boards, sprinkle thyself all about with holy water, incense thyself with holy incense, and take me with thee. She shall not have thee. And the moment she leaves her coffin, do thou jump quickly into it, and whatever she may say to thee, and however she may implore thee, let her not get into it again until she says to thee, My consort. So he went. There he stood in the middle of the church, fenced himself about with his boards, strewed consecrated poppy seed all around him, incensed himself with holy incense, and read and read. About the middle of the night a tempest arose outside, and there was a rustling and a roaring, a hissing and a wailing. The church shook, the altar candelabra were thrown down, the holy images fell on their faces. O Lord, how awful! Then came a bang, bang, from the coffin, and again the Tsarina started up. She left her coffin and fluttered about the church. She rushed at the boards and made a snatch at him, and fell back. She rushed at him again, and again she fell back. She foamed at the mouth, and her fury every instant grew worse and worse. She dashed herself about, and darted madly from one corner of the church to the other, seeking him everywhere. But he skipped into the coffin, with the image of St. Michael by his side. She ran all over the church, seeking him. He was here, and now he is not here, cried she. Then she ran farther on, felt all about her, and cried again, He was here, and now he's not here. At last she sprang up to the coffin, and there he was. Then she began to beg and pray him, Come down, come down. I'll try and catch thee no more. Only come down, come down. But he only prayed to God, and answered her never a word. Then the cock crew once. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Alas, come down, my consort, cried she. Then he came down, and they both fell on their knees and began praying to God, and wept sore and gave thanks to God, because he had had mercy on them both. And at the dawn of day crowds of people, with the Tsar at the head of them, came to the church. Shall we find him reading prayers, or shall we only find his bones? Said they. And lo, there they both were, on their knees praying fervently to God. Then the Tsar rejoiced greatly, and embraced both him and her. After that they had a grand service in the church, and sprinkled her with holy water, and baptized her again, and the unclean spirit departed from her. Then the Tsar gave the young man half his power, and half his kingdom. But the merchants departed in their ships, with their nephew on board. They lived together, and time went on, and the young man still remained a bachelor, and was so handsome that words cannot describe it. But the Tsar lived alone with his daughter. She, however, grew sadder and sadder, and was no longer like her former self, so sorrowful was she. And the Tsar asked her, saying, Wherefore art thou so sorrowful? I am not sorrowful, father, said she. But the Tsar watched her, and saw that she was sorrowful, and there was no help for it. Then he asked her again, Art thou ill? Nay, dear dad, said she. I myself know not what is the matter with me. And so it went on, till the Tsar dreamt a dream, and in this dream it was said to him, Thy daughter grieves because she loves so much the youth who drove the unclean spirit out of her. Then the Tsar asked her, Dost thou love this youth? And she answered, I do, dear father. Then why didst thou not tell me before, my daughter? Said he. Then he sent for his heyduks and commanded them, saying, Go this instant to such and such a kingdom, and there ye will find the youth who cured my daughter. Bring him to me. Then they went on until they found him, and he took just the same laths and boards that he had had before, and went with them. The Tsar met him, and bought all his boards, and when they split them in pieces, lo, they were full of precious stones. Then the Tsar took him to his own house, and gave him his daughter, and they lived right merrily together. End of Section 6. Recording by Anthony Castellani.
Section 7 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by C. Morey. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The story of Tremsin, the bird Tsar, and Nastasia, the lovely maid of the sea. There was, once upon a time, a man and a woman, and they had one little boy. In the summertime they used to go out and mow corn in the fields, and one summer, when they had laid their little lad by the side of a sheaf, an eagle swooped down, caught up the child, carried him into a forest, and laid him in its nest. Now in this forest 3 bandits chanced to be wandering at the same time. They heard the child crying in the eagle's nest. "Oh, oh, oh!" So they went up to the oak on which was the nest and said to one another, "Let us hew down the tree and kill the child." "No," replied one of them, "it were better to climb up the tree and bring him down alive." So he climbed up the tree and brought down the lad, and they nurtured him and gave him the name of Tremsin. They brought up Tremsin until he became a youth, and then they gave him a horse, set him upon it, and said to him, "Now go out into the wide world and search for thy father and thy mother." So Tremsin went out into the wide world and pastured his steed on the vast steppes, and his steed spoke to him and said, "When we have gone a little farther, thou wilt see before thee a plume of the bird Tsar. Pick it not up, for sore trouble will be thine." Footnote: Tsar, i.e., burning bright. End of footnote. Then they went on again. They went on and on, through 10 tsardoms they went, till they came to another empire, in the land of the thrice 10, where lay the feather. And the youth said to himself, "Why should I not pick up the feather when it shines so brightly, even from afar?" And he went near to the feather, and it shone so that the like of it cannot be expressed, or conceived, or imagined, or even told of in tales. Then Tremsin picked up the feather and went into the town over against him. And in that town there lived a rich nobleman. And Tremsin entered the house of this nobleman and said, "Sir, may I not take service with thee as a labourer?" The nobleman looked at him, and, seeing that he was comely and stalwart, "Why not? Of course thou mayest," he said. So he took him into his service. Now this nobleman had many servants, and they curried his horses for him, and made them smart and glossy against the day he should go a-hunting. And Tremsin began to curry his horse likewise, and the servants of the nobleman could not make the horses of their master so shining and bright as Tremsin made his own horse. So they looked more closely, and they perceived that when Tremsin cleaned his horse, he stroked it with the feather of the bird Tsar, and the coat of the good steed straightway shone like burnished silver. Then those servants were filled with envy, and said among themselves, "How can we remove this fellow from the world? We'll saddle him with a task he is unable to do, and then our master will drive him away." So they went to their master and said, "Tremsin has a feather of the bird Tsar, and he says that if he likes he can get the bird Tsar itself." Then the nobleman sent for Tremsin and said to him, "O Tremsin, my henchmen say that thou canst get the bird Tsar if thou dost choose." "Nay, but I cannot," replied Tremsin. "Answer me not," said the nobleman, "for sure as I've a sword, I'll slice thy head off like a gourd." Then Tremsin fell a-weeping and went away to his horse. "My master," he said, "hath given me a task to do what will clean undo me." "What task is that?" asked the horse. "Why, to fetch him the bird Tsar." "Why, that's not a task, but a trifle," replied the horse. "Let us go to the steppes," it continued, "and let me go a-browsing, but do thou strip thyself stark naked and lie down in the grass, and the bird Tsar will straightway swoop down to feed. So long as she only claws about thy body, touch her not, but as soon as she begins to claw at thine eyes, seize her by the legs." So, when they got to the wild steppes, Tremsin stripped himself naked and flung himself in the grass, and immediately the bird Tsar swooped down and began pecking all about him, and at last she pecked at his eyes. Then Tremsin seized her by both legs and mounted his horse and took the bird Tsar to the nobleman. Then his fellow servants were more envious than ever, and they said among themselves, "How shall we devise for him a task to do that cannot be done, and so rid the world of him altogether?" So they bethought them, and then they went to the nobleman and said, "Tremsin says that to get the bird Tsar was nothing, and that he is also able to get the thrice lovely Nastasia of the sea. Then the nobleman sent again for Tremsin and said to him, Look now, thou didst get for me the Bird-Zar. See that thou now also gettest for me the thrice lovely Nastasia of the sea. But I cannot, sir, said Tremsin. Answer me not so, replied the nobleman, for sure as I've a sword, I'll slice thy head off like a gourd, and thou bring her not. Then Tremsin went out to his horse and fell a-weeping. Wherefore dost thou weep? Asked the faithful steed. Wherefore should I not weep? He replied. My master has given me a task that cannot be done. What task is that? Why, to fetch him the thrice lovely Nastasia of the sea. Oh, laughed the horse, that is not a task, but a trifle. Go to thy master and say, Cause white tents to be raised by the seashore, and buy wares of sundry kinds, and wine, and spirits in bottles and flasks, and the thrice lovely Nastasia will come to purchase thy wares, and then thou mayest take her. And the nobleman did so. He caused white tents to be pitched by the seashore, and bought kerchiefs and scarves, and spread them out gaily, and made great store of wine and brandy in bottles and flasks. Then Tremsin rode toward the tents, and while he was on his way, his horse said to him, Now, when I go to graze, do thou lie down and feign to sleep. Then the thrice lovely Nastasia will appear and say, What for thy wares? But do thou keep silence. But when she begins to taste of the wine and the brandy, then she will go to sleep in the tent, and thou canst catch her easily and hold her fast. Then Tremsin lay down and feigned to sleep, and forth from the sea came the thrice lovely Nastasia, and went up to the tents and asked, Merchant, merchant, what for thy wares? But he lay there and moved never a limb. She asked the same thing over and over again, but, getting no answer, went into the tents where stood the flasks and bottles. She tasted of the wine. How good it was! She tasted of the brandy. That was still better. So, from tasting, she fell to drinking. First she drank a little, and then she drank a little more, and at last she went to sleep in the tent. Then Tremsin seized the thrice lovely Nastasia, and put her behind him on horseback, and carried her off to the nobleman. The nobleman praised Tremsin exceedingly, but the thrice lovely Nastasia said, Look now, since thou hast found the feather of the Bird-Zar, and the Bird-Zar herself, since also thou hast found me, thou must now fetch me also my little coral necklace from the sea. Then Tremsin went out to his faithful steed and wept sorely, and told him all about it. The horse said to him, Did I not tell thee that grievous woe would come upon thee if thou didst pick up that feather? But the horse added, Come, weep not. After all, 'tis not a task, but a trifle. Then they went along by the sea, and the horse said to him, Let me out to graze, and then keep watch till thou seest a crab come forth from the sea, and then say to him, I'll catch thee. So Tremsin let his horse out to graze, and then himself stood by the seashore, and watched till he saw a crab come swimming along. Then he said to the crab, I'll catch thee. Oh, seize me not, said the crab, but let me get back to the sea, and I will be of great service to thee. Very well, said Tremsin, but thou must get me from the sea the coral necklace of the thrice lovely Nastasia. And with that he let the crab go back into the sea. Then the crab called together all her young crabs, and they collected all the coral and brought it ashore and gave it to Tremsin. Then the faithful steed came running up, and Tremsin mounted it, and took the coral to the thrice lovely Nastasia. Well, said Nastasia, thou hast got the feather of the Bird-Zar. Thou hast got the Bird-Zar itself. Thou hast got me my coral. Get me now from the sea my herd of wild horses. Then Tremsin was sore distressed, and went to his faithful steed, and wept bitterly, and told him all about it. Well, said the horse, this time 'tis no trifle, but a real hard task. Go now to thy master, and bid him buy 20 hides, and 20 poods of pitch, and 20 poods of flax, and 20 poods of hair. Footnote, a pood, 40 pounds. End of footnote. So Tremsin went to his master and told him, and his master bought it all. Then Tremsin loaded his horse with all this, and to the sea they went together. And when they came to the sea, the horse said, "Now, lay upon me the hides and the tar and the flax, and lay them in this order, first a hide, then a pood of tar, then a pood of flax, and so on, laying them thus till they are all laid." Tremsin did so. "And now," said the horse, "I shall plunge into the sea, and when thou seest a large red wave driving toward the shore, run away till the red wave has passed, and thou dost see a white wave coming, and then sit down on the shore and keep watch. I shall then come out of the sea, and after me the whole herd. Then thou must strike with the horsehair the horse which gallops immediately after me, and he will not be too strong for thee." So the faithful steed plunged into the sea, and Tremsin sat down on the shore and watched. The horse swam to a bosquet that rose out of the sea, and there the herd of sea-horses was grazing. When the strong charger of Nastasia saw him and the hides he carried on his back, it set off after him at full tilt, while the whole herd followed the strong charger of Nastasia. They drove the horse with the hides into the sea and pursued him. Then the strong charger of Nastasia caught up with the steed of Tremsin and tore off one of his hides and began to worry it with his teeth and tear it up into fragments as he ran. Then he caught him up a second time and tore off another hide and began to worry that in a like manner till he tore it also to shreds. And thus he ran after Tremsin's steed for 70 miles, till he had tore off all the hides and worried them to bits. But Tremsin sat upon the seashore till he saw the large white billow bounding in, and behind the billow came his own horse, and behind his own horse came the thrice terrible charger of the thrice lovely Nastasia, with the whole herd at his heels. Tremsin struck him full on the forehead with the 20 poods of hair, and immediately he stood stock still. Then Tremsin threw a halter over him, mounted, and drove the whole herd to the thrice lovely Nastasia. Nastasia praised Tremsin for his prowess, and said to him, "Well, thou hast got the feather of the bird-czar, thou hast got the bird-czar itself, thou hast got me my coral and my herd of horses, now milk my mare and put the milk into 3 vats, so that there may be milk hot as boiling water in the first vat, lukewarm milk in the second vat, and icy cold milk in the third vat." Then Tremsin went to his faithful steed and wept bitterly, and the horse said to him, "Wherefore dost thou weep?" "Why should I not weep?" he cried. "The thrice lovely Nastasia has given me a task to do that cannot be done. I am to fill 3 vats with the milk from her mare, and the milk must be boiling hot in the first vat, lukewarm in the second vat, and icy cold in the third vat." "Oh," cried the horse, "that is not a task, but a trifle. I'll caress the mare, and then go on nibbling till thou hast milked all 3 vats full." So Tremsin did so. He milked the 3 vats full, and the milk in the first vat was boiling hot, and in the second vat warm, and in the third vat freezing cold. When all was ready, the thrice lovely Nastasia said to Tremsin, "Now leap first of all into the cold vat, and then into the warm vat, and then into the boiling hot vat." Tremsin leaped into the first vat, and leaped out again an old man. He leapt into the second vat, and leaped out again a youth. He leapt into the third vat, but when he leaped out again, he was so young and handsome that no pen can describe it, and no tale can tell of it. Then the thrice lovely Nastasia leaped herself into the vats. She leapt into the first vat, and came out an old woman. She leapt into the second vat, and came out a young maid. But when she leapt out of the third vat, she was so handsome and goodly that no pen can describe it, and no tale can tell of it. Then the thrice lovely Nastasia made the nobleman leap into the vats. He leapt into the first vat, and became quite old. He leapt into the second vat, and became quite young. He leapt into the third vat, and burst into pieces. Then Tremsin took unto himself the thrice lovely Nastasia to wife, and they lived happily together on the nobleman's estate, and the evil servants they drove right away. End of section 7.
Section 8 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kurt from Tucson, Arizona. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Serpent Wife. There was once a gentleman who had a labourer who never went about in company. His fellow servants did all they could to make him come with them, and now and then enticed him into the tavern, but they could never get him to stay there long, and he always wandered away by himself through the woods. One day he went strolling about in the forest as usual, far away from any village and the haunts of men, when he came upon a huge serpent, which wriggled straight up to him and said, "I am going to eat thee on the spot." But the labourer, who was used to the loneliness of the forest, replied, "Very well, eat me if thou hast a mind to." Then the serpent said, "Nay, I will not eat thee, only do what I tell thee." And the serpent began to tell the man what he had to do. "Turn back home," it said, "and thou wilt find thy master angry because thou hast tarried so long, and there was none to work for him, so that his corn has to remain standing in the field. Then he will send thee to bring in his sheaves, and I'll help thee. Load the wagon well, but don't take quite all the sheaves from the field. Leave one little sheaf behind. More than that thou needst not leave, but that thou must leave. Then beg thy master to let thee have this little sheaf by way of wages. Take no money from him, but that one little sheaf only. Then, when thy master has given thee this sheaf, burn it, and a fair lady will leap out of it. Take her to wife." The labourer obeyed, and went and worked for his master as the serpent had told him. He went out into the field to bring home his master's corn, and marvellously he managed it. He did all the carrying himself, and loaded the wagon so heavily that it creaked beneath its burden. Then when he had brought home all his master's corn, he begged that he might have the remaining little sheaf for himself. He refused to be rewarded for his smart labour. He would take no money. He wanted nothing for himself, he said, but the little sheaf he had left in the field. So his master let him have the sheaf. Then he went out by himself into the field, burnt the sheaf, just as the serpent had told him, and immediately a lovely lady leapt out of it. The labourer forthwith took and married her, and now he began to look out for a place to build him a hut upon. His master gave him a place where he might build his hut, and his wife helped him so much with the building of it, that it seemed to him as if he himself never laid a hand to it. His hut grew up quick as thought, and it contained everything that they wanted. The man could not understand it. He could only walk about and wonder at it. Wherever he looked there was everything quite spick and span, and ready for use. None in the whole village had a better house than he, and so he might have lived all in peace and prosperity to the end of his days, had not his desires outstripped his deserts. He had 3 fields of standing corn, and when he came home one day, his labourers said to him, "Thy corn is not gathered in yet, though it is standing all ripe on its stalks." Now the season was getting on, and for all the care and labour of his wife, the corn was still standing in the field. "Why, what's the meaning of this?" thought he. Then in his anger he cried, "I see how it is. Once a serpent, always a serpent." He was quite beside himself all the way home, and was very wrath with his wife because of the corn. When he got home, he went straight to his chamber to lie down on his pillow. There was no sign of his wife, but a huge serpent was just coiling itself round and settling down in the middle of the pillow. Then he called to mind how once his wife had said to him, "Beware, for heaven's sake, of ever calling me a serpent. I will not suffer thee to call me by that name, and if thou dost, thou shalt lose thy wife." He called this to mind now, but it was already too late. What he had said could not be unsaid. Then he reflected what a good wife he had had, and how she herself had sought him out, and how she had waited upon him continually and done him boundless good, and yet he had not been able to refrain his tongue, so that now, maybe, he would be without a wife for the rest of his days. His heart grew heavy within him as he thought of all this, and he wept bitterly at the harm he had done to himself. Then the serpent said to him, "Weep no more. What is to be must be. Is it thy standing corn thou art grieved about? Go up to thy barn, and there thou wilt find all thy corn lying, to the very last little grain. Have I not brought it all home, and threshed it for thee, and set everything in order? And now I must depart to the place where thou didst first find me." Then she crept off, and the man followed her, weeping and mourning all the time, as for one already dead. When they reached the forest, she stopped and coiled herself round and round beneath a hazelnut bush. Then she said to the man, "Now kiss me once, but see to it that I do not bite thee." Then he kissed her once, and she wound herself round a branch of a tree, and asked him, "What dost thou feel within thee?" He answered, "At the moment when I kissed thee, it seemed to me as if I knew everything that was going on in the world." Then she said to him again, "Kiss me a second time, and what dost thou feel now?" she asked when he had kissed her again. "Now," said he, "I understand all languages which are spoken among men." Then she said to him, "And now kiss me a third time, but this will be for the last time." Then he kissed the serpent for the last time, and she said to him, "What dost thou feel now?" "Now," he said, "I know all that is going on under the earth." "Go now," said she, "to the Tsar, and he will give thee his daughter for the knowledge thou hast. But pray to God for poor me, for now I must be and remain a serpent forever." And with that the serpent uncoiled herself and disappeared among the bushes. But the man went away and wedded the Tsar's daughter. End of Section 8. Section 9 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Kurt from Tucson, Arizona. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The story of Unlucky Daniel. There was once upon a time a youth called Unlucky Dan. Wherever he went, and whatever he did, and with whomsoever he served, nothing came of it. All his labor was like spilt water, and he got no good from it. One day he took service with a new master. "I'll serve thee a whole year," said he, "for a piece of sown wheat land." His master agreed, and he entered into his service, and at the same time he sowed his piece of wheat land. His wheat shot up rapidly. When his master's wheat was in the stalk, his was already in the ear, and when his master's wheat was in the ear, his own wheat was already ripe. "I'll reap it tomorrow," thought he. The same night a cloud arose, the hail poured down and destroyed his wheat altogether. Daniel fell a weeping. "I'll go serve another master," he cried. "Perhaps God will then prosper me." So he went to another master. "I'll serve thee for a whole year," said he, "if thou wilt give me that wild colt." So he stopped and served him, and by the end of the year he trained the wild colt so well that he made a carriage horse out of it. "Oh ho!" thought he, "I shall take away something with me this time." The same night the wolves made an inroad upon the stables, and tore the horse to pieces. Daniel fell a weeping. "I'll go to another master," said he. "Perhaps I shall be luckier there." So he went to a third master, and on this master's tomb lay a large stone. Whence it came none knew, and it was so heavy that none could move it, though they tried for ages. "I'll serve thee a year," said he, "for that stone." The master agreed, and he entered his service. Then a change came over the stone, and divers flowers began to grow upon it. On one side they were red, on the second side silver, and on the third side golden. "Oh," thought Daniel, "that stone at any rate will soon be mine. Nobody can move it." But the next morning a thunderbolt descended and struck the stone, and shivered it to atoms. Then Daniel fell a-weeping, and lamented that God had given him nothing, though he had served for so many years. But the people said to him, "Listen now, thou that art so unlucky, why dost thou not go to the Tsar? He is the father of us all, and will therefore certainly care for thee." So he listened to them and went, and the Tsar gave him a place at his court. One day the Tsar said to him, "I marvel that thou art so unlucky, for do whatsoever thou wilt, thou art none the better for it. I would fain requite thee for all thy labours." Then he took and filled 3 barrels, the first with gold, and the second with coal, and the third with sand, and said to Daniel, "Look now, if thou dost pitch upon that which is filled with gold, thou shalt be a Tsar. If thou dost choose the one that is filled with coal, thou shalt be a blacksmith. But if thou dost pick out the one that is full of sand, why then thou art indeed hopelessly unlucky, and out of my tsardom thou must go straightway. Yet I will give thee a horse and armor to take along with thee." So Daniel was brought to the place where there were the 3 barrels, and went about them, and felt them one after the other. "This one is full of gold," said he. They broke it open, and it was full of sand. "Well," said the Tsar, "I see that thou art hopelessly unlucky. Depart from my tsardom, for I have no need at all of such as thou." Then he gave him a charger and armor, and the full equipment of a Cossack, and sent him away. He went on for a whole day. He went on for a second day, and there was nothing to eat, either for his horse or himself. He went for a third day, and in the distance he saw a haycock. "That will do for my horse, at any rate," thought he, "even if it is of no good to me." So he went up to it, and immediately it burst into flames. Daniel began to weep, when he heard a voice crying piteously, "Save me, save me, I am burning." "How can I save thee," he cried, "when I myself cannot draw near?" "Oh, give me thy weapon," cried the voice, "and I'll seize hold of it, and then thou canst pull me out." So he stretched forth his weapon, and drew forth a goodly serpent, such as is only known of in old folk songs. And she said to him, "Since thou hast drawn me out, thou must also take me home." "How shall I carry thee?" asked he. "Carry me on thy horse, and in whatsoever direction I turn my head and his, thither go." So he took her upon his horse, and they went on till they came to a court so splendid that it was a delight to look at it. Then she glided down from his charger and said, "Wait here, and I'll soon be with thee again." And with that she wriggled under the gate. He stood there, and stood and waited till he wept from sheer weariness. But at last she came out again in the shape of a lovely damsel in gorgeous raiment, and opened the gate for him. "Lead in thy horse," said she, "and eat and rest a while." So they went into the courtyard, and in the midst of it stood 2 springs. The lady drew out of one of these springs a little glass of water, and strewing a handful of oats beside it, said, "Fasten up thy horse here." "What," thought he, "for these 3 days we have had naught to eat or drink, and now she mocks us with a handful of oats." Then they went together to the guest chamber, and she gave him there a little glass of water, and a small piece of wheaten bread. "Why, what is this for a hungry man like me?" thought he. But when he chanced to glance through the window, he saw that the whole courtyard was full of oats and water, and that his horse had already eaten its fill. Then he nibbled his little piece of wheaten bread, and sipped his water, and his hunger was immediately satisfied. "Well," said the lady, "hast thou eaten thy fill?" "That I have," he replied. "Then lie down and rest a while," said she. And the next morning when he rose up, she said to him, "Give me thy horse, thy armor, and thy raiment, and I'll give thee mine in exchange." Then she gave him her shift and her weapon, and said, "This sword is of such a sort that if thou do but wave it, all men will fall down before thee. And as for this shift, when thou hast it on, none will be able to seize thee. And now go on thy way till thou come to an inn, and there they will tell thee that the Tsar of that land is seeking warriors. Go and offer thyself to him, and thou shalt marry his daughter, but tell her not the truth for 7 years." Then they took leave of each other, and he departed. He came to the inn, and there they asked him whence he came. And when they knew that he came from a strange land, they said to him, "A strange people has attacked our Tsar, and he cannot defend himself, for a mighty warrior has conquered his tsardom and carried off his daughter, and worries him to death." "Show me the way to your Tsar," said Daniel. Then they showed him, and he went. When he came to the Tsar, he said to him, "I will subdue this strange land for thee. All the army I want is a couple of Cossacks, but they must be picked men." Then the heralds went through the tsardom till they had found these 2 Cossacks, and Daniel went forth with them into the endless steppes, and there he bade them lie down and sleep while he kept watch. And while they slept, the army of the strange country came upon them, and cried to Daniel to turn back if he would escape destruction. And then they began to fire with their guns and cannons, and they fired so many balls that the bodies of the 2 Cossacks were quite covered by them. Then Daniel waved his sword and smote, and only those whom his blows did not reach escaped alive. So he vanquished them all, and conquered that strange land, and came back and married the Tsar's daughter, and they lived happily together. But counselors from the strange land whispered dark sayings in the ears of the Tsarivna. "What is this fellow that thou hast taken to thyself? Who is he, and whence? Find out for us wherein lies his strength, that we may destroy him and take thee away." Then she began asking him, and he said to her, "Look now, all my strength is in these gloves." Then she waited till he was asleep, and drew them off him, and gave them to the people from the strange land. And the next day he went hunting, and the evil counselors surrounded and shot at him with their darts, and beat him with the gloves, but it was all in vain. Then he waved his sword, and whomsoever he struck fell to the ground, and he clapped them all in prison. But his wife caressed and wheedled him again, and said, "Nay, but tell me, wherein doth thy strength lie?" "My strength, darling," said he, "lies in my boots." Then she drew off his boots while he slept, and gave them to his enemies, and they fell upon him again as he went out. But again he waved his sword, and as many as he struck fell to the ground, and he put them all in prison. Then his wife wheedled and caressed him the 3rd time. "Nay, but tell me, darling," quoth she, "wherein doth thy strength lie?" Then he was wearied with her beseeching, and said to her, "My strength lies in this sword of mine, and in my shirt, and so long as I have this shirt on, nobody can touch me." Then she caressed and fondled him, and said, "Thou shouldst take a bath, my darling, and well wash thyself. My father always did so." So he let himself be persuaded, and no sooner had he undressed than she changed all his clothes for others, and gave his sword and his shirt to his enemies. Then he came out of his bath, and immediately they fell upon him, and cut him to pieces, put him in a sack, placed him on his horse, and let the horse go where it would. So the horse went on, and wandered farther and farther, till it came to the old place where he had stayed with the serpent lady. And when his benefactress saw him, she said, "Why, if poor unlucky Daniel hasn't fallen into a scrape again." And immediately she took him out of the sack, and fitted his pieces together, and washed them clean, and took healing water from one of the springs, and living water from the other, and sprinkled him all over, and he stood there sound and strong again. "Now did I not bid thee tell not thy wife the truth for 7 years?" said she, "and thou wouldst not take heed." And then he stood there, and spoke never a word. "Well, now, rest a while," she continued, "for thou dost need it, and then I'll give thee something else." So the next day she gave him a chain, and said to him, "Listen, go to that inn where thou didst go before, and early next morning, whilst thou art bathing, bid the innkeeper beat thee with all his might on the back with this chain, and so thou wilt get back to thy wife, but tell her not a word of what has happened." So he went to the same inn, and passed the night there. And on the morrow he called the innkeeper, and said to him, "Look now, the first time I dip my head in the water, beat me about the back with this chain as hard as thou canst." So the innkeeper waited till he had ducked his head under the water, and then he thrashed him with the chain, whereupon he turned into a horse so beautiful that it was a delight to look upon it. The innkeeper was so glad, so glad. "So I've got rid of one guest only to get another one," thought he. He lost no time in taking the horse to the fair and offered it for sale, and among those who saw it was the Tsar himself. "What dost thou ask for it?" said the Tsar. "I ask 5,000 roubles." Then the Tsar counted down the money and took the horse away. When he got to his court, he made a great to-do about his beautiful horse, and cried to his daughter, "Come and see, dear little heart, what a fine horse I have bought." Then she came forth to look at it, but the moment she saw it, she cried, "That horse will be my ruin. Thou must kill it on the spot." "Nay, dear little heart, how can I do such a thing?" said the Tsar. "Slay it thou must, and slay it thou shalt," cried the Tsarivna. So they sent for a knife and began sharpening it, when one of the maidens of the court took pity on the horse and cried, "Oh, my good, my darling horse, so lovely as thou art, and yet to kill thee." But the horse neighed and went to her and said, "Look now, take the first drop of blood which flows from me, and bury it in the garden." Then they slew the horse, but the maiden did as she was told, and took the drop of blood and buried it in the garden. And from this drop of blood there sprang up a cherry tree, and its first leaf was golden, and its second leaf was a richer color still, and its third leaf was yet another color, and every leaf upon it was different to the others. One day the Tsar went out walking in his garden, and when he saw this cherry tree, he fell in love with it, and praised it to his daughter. "Look," said he, "what a beauteous cherry tree we have in our garden. Who can tell whence it sprung?" But the moment the Tsarivna saw it, she cried, "That tree will be my ruin. Thou must cut it down." "Nay," said he, "how can I cut down the fairest ornament of my garden?" "Down it must come, and down it shall come," replied the Tsarivna. Then they sent for an axe and made ready to cut it down, but the damsel came running up and said, "Oh, darling little cherry tree, so fair thou art. From a horse thou hast sprung, and now they will fell thee before thou hast lived a day." "Never mind," said the cherry tree, "take the first chip that falls from me and throw it into the water." Then they cut down the cherry tree, but the girl did as she was bidden, and threw the first chip from the cherry tree into the water, and out of it swam a drake so beautiful that it was a delight to look upon it. Then the Tsar went a hunting, and saw it swimming in the water, and it was so close that he could touch it with his hand. The Tsar took off his clothes and plunged into the water after it, and it enticed him farther and farther away from the shore. Then the drake swam toward the spot where the Tsar had left his clothes, and when it came up to them, it changed into a man, and put them on, and behold, the man was Daniel. Then he called the Tsar, "Swim hither, swim hither." The Tsar swam up, but when he swam ashore, Daniel met and killed him. And after that he went back to court in the Tsar's clothes. Then all the courtiers hailed him as the Tsar, but he said, "Where is that damsel who was here just now?" They brought her instantly before him. "Well," said he to her, "thou hast been a second mother to me, and now thou shalt be my second wife." So he lived with her and was happy. But he caused his first wife to be tied to the tails of wild horses, and torn to pieces in the endless steppes. End of section 9. Section 10 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Kurt from Tucson, Arizona. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Sparrow and the Bush. A sparrow once flew down upon a bush and said, "Little bush, give good little sparrow a swing." "I won't," said the little bush. Then the sparrow was angry and went to the goat and said, "Goat, goat, Nibble bush, bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the goat. Then the sparrow went to the wolf and said, Wolf, wolf, eat goat, goat won't nibble bush, bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the wolf. Then the sparrow went to the people and said, Good people, kill wolf, wolf won't eat goat, goat won't nibble bush, bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. We won't, said the people. Then the sparrow went to the Tartars and said, Tartars, Tartars, slay people, people won't kill wolf, wolf won't eat goat, goat won't nibble bush, bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. But the Tartars said, We won't slay the people. And the people said, We won't kill the wolf. And the wolf said, I won't eat the goat. And the goat said, I won't nibble the bush. And the bush said, I won't give the good little sparrow a swing. Go, said the bush to the fire, for the Tartars won't slay the people, and the people won't kill the wolf, and the wolf won't eat the goat, and the goat won't nibble the bush, and the bush won't give the dear little sparrow a swing. But the fire also said, I won't. They were all alike. Go to the water, said he. So the sparrow went to the water and said, Come, water, quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. But the water also said, I won't. So the sparrow went to the ox and said, Ox, ox, drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the ox. Then the sparrow went to the poleaxe and said, Poleaxe, poleaxe, strike ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the poleaxe. So the sparrow went to the worms and said, Worms, worms, gnaw poleaxe. Poleaxe won't strike ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. We won't, said the worms. Then the sparrow went to the hen and said, Hen, hen, peck worms. Worms won't gnaw poleaxe. Poleaxe won't strike ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the hen, but go to the sparrowhawk. He ought to give the first push, or why is he called the pusher? Footnote. Shulyak means both sparrowhawk and push. End footnote. So the sparrow went to the sparrowhawk and said, Come, pusher, seize hen. Hen won't peck worms. Worms won't gnaw poleaxe. Poleaxe won't strike ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. Then the sparrowhawk began to seize the hen. The hen began to peck the worms began to gnaw the poleaxe began to hit the ox began to drink the water began to quench the fire began to burn the Tartars began to slay the people began to kill the wolf began to eat the goat began to nibble the bush, and the bush cried out, Swing away, swing away, swing, little Daddy Sparrow, have your fling. End of section 10.
Section 11 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Devorah Allen. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Old Dog. There was once a man who had a dog. While the dog was young, he was made much of, but when he grew old, he was driven out of doors. So he went and lay outside the fence, and a wolf came up to him and said, "Doggy, why so down in the mouth?" "While I was young," said the dog, "they made much of me, but now that I am old, they beat me." The wolf said, "I see thy master in the field. Go after him, and perchance he'll give thee something." "Nay," said the dog, "they won't even let me walk about the fields now, they only beat me." "Look now," said the wolf, "I'm sorry, and will make things better for thee. Thy mistress, I see, has put her child down beneath that waggon. I'll seize it, and make off with it. Run thou after me and bark, and though thou hast no teeth left, tussle me as much as thou canst, so that thy mistress may see it." So the wolf seized the child, and ran away with it, and the dog ran after him, and began to tussle him. His mistress saw it, and made after them with a harrow, crying at the same time, "Husband! Husband! The wolf has got the child! Gabriel! Gabriel! Don't you see? The wolf has got the child!" Then the man chased the wolf and got back the child. "Brave old dog," said he, "you are old and toothless, and yet you can give help in time of need, and will not let your master's child be stolen." And henceforth the woman and her husband gave the old dog a large lump of bread every day. End of section 11. Section 12 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Devorah Allen. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Fox and the Cat. In a certain forest there once lived a fox, and near to the fox lived a man who had a cat that had been a good mouser in its youth, but was now old and half blind. The man didn't want puss any longer, but not liking to kill it, took it out into the forest and lost it there. Then the fox came up and said, "Why, Mr. Shaggy Matthew, how do you do? What brings you here?" "Alas," said pussy, "my master loved me as long as I could bite, but now that I can bite no longer, and have left off catching mice, and I used to catch them finely once, he doesn't like to kill me, but he has left me in the wood where I must perish miserably." "No, dear pussy," said the fox, "you leave it to me, and I'll help you to get your daily bread." "You are very good, dear little sister Foxy," said the cat, and the fox built him a little shed with a garden round it to walk about in. Now one day the hare came to steal the man's cabbage. "Cream, cream, cream!" he squeaked. But the cat popped his head out of the window, and when he saw the hare he put up his back and stuck up his tail and said, "Ft, ft, frrrr." The hare was frightened and ran away and told the bear, the wolf, and the wild boar all about it. "Never mind," said the bear. "I tell you what, we'll all four give a banquet, and invite the fox and the cat, and do for the pair of them. Now look here, I'll steal the man's mead, and you, Mr. Wolf, steal his fat pot, and you, Mr. Wild Boar, root up his fruit trees, and you, Mr. Bunny, go and invite the fox and the cat to dinner." So they made everything ready as the bear had said, and the hare ran off to invite the guests. He came beneath the window and said, "We invite your little ladyship Foxy Woxy, together with Mr. Shaggy Matthew, to dinner." And back he ran again. "But you should have told them to bring their spoons with them," said the bear. "Oh, what a head I've got! If I didn't quite forget!" cried the hare, and back he went again, ran beneath the window, and cried, "Mind you bring your spoons." "Very well," said the fox. So the cat and the fox went to the banquet, and when the cat saw the bacon, he put up his back and stuck out his tail and cried, "Mew, mew," with all his might. But they thought he said, "Mallow, mallow." Footnote: What a little, what a little. End of footnote. "What?" said the bear, who was hiding behind the beeches with the other beasts. "Here have we four been getting together all we could, and this pig-faced cat calls it too little? What a monstrous cat he must be to have such an appetite!" So they were all four very frightened, and the bear ran up a tree, and the others hid where they could. But when the cat saw the boar's bristles sticking out from behind the bushes, he thought it was a mouse, and put up his back again and cried, "Ft, ft, ft, frrrr." Then they were more frightened than ever, and the boar went into a bush still farther off, and the wolf went behind an oak, and the bear got down from the tree and climbed up into a bigger one, and the hare ran right away. But the cat remained in the midst of all the good things and ate away at the bacon, and the little fox gobbled up the honey, and they ate and ate till they couldn't eat any more, and then they both went home licking their paws. End of section 12.